Okay then, welcome back. And now we're going to be talking about the pipeline. So we're going to start with very simple things. Now, at the beginning here, when it comes to the design document, we'll only be using, here we're just going to do this on this side. And zoom in. Now for the design document, we'll be using draw.io, this very same website that I'm using right now. Once you have the design document, let's see what comes next. Well, we need to have the 3D art. Now the 3D art will be done in Maya LT 2000 and whatever year, whatever year you're watching this in will be. Once you have that done, we'll be prototyping in Unreal Engine 4. So prototyping in UE4. Okay. Then we'll be using an audio which is simply purchased. I can't show you how to make audio, so I'm not a musician. Apart from all these things, this is one of the things that I really have no desire, need, or interest in. So I'd rather get the audio from somewhere else, and I recommend you do too, unless you're a musician, in which case go nuts. Programming, we're going to be programming in Blueprint. We're not going to be going to C# C++ or anything, but you will learn how to the concepts of programming. What is object-oriented programming on the basic level. Okay. By the way, when it comes to Maya, before this, I actually forgot. Maybe if I connect everything properly and disconnect this. After we get things done in Maya, we're going to import them into Substance. Okay. And after Substance, we will probably get it. Actually, this is getting further and further away again. After Substance is done, we can probably import it back in Maya. But basically, you got Draw.io. You go into Maya, make your assets, import it up to Substance to texture it, basically, if you want to, or add some default Substance to prototyping. You got loads of substances there you can add. So if you don't have Substance, you can skip this step. You don't really need this software. However, I highly recommend that you do. Otherwise, you'd probably be using maybe Photoshop. You'd still be using the Photoshop for, just in case you need to edit some 2D file like a texture or a normal, if you want to make a displacement map or a height map. Height maps are especially easy to make on Photoshop. So you might want to do a height map on Photoshop or something like that for terrain generation, but to generate some terrain. But I'll explain it to you later. And after we got Substance, it all gets imported into UE4. When it comes to actually what am I doing here? Gets imported into UE4, and it also can get imported into Maya to iterate on your workflow. So you could go send it back and back to Substance, back to Maya, back to Substance. Also, you can export things directly from Maya into UE4 because. You might not need any textures or anything depending on your program. Now, if this is a 2D game, you will also need a 2D editor. So unless it's a Photoshop one, because if you find making Photoshop stuff, you can also send it through Photoshop. You can use Illustrator for vector graphics, which is essentially, well, there's a difference between pixel graphics and vector graphics, but one is essentially, with pixel graphics, the more you zoom in, right, the more pixelated things are going to be. With vector graphics, no matter how much you zoom in, it'll always be the same because it's calculated on the spot. So in this case, if I zoom in, I zoom in, so this is still sharp. All this is sharp. Now, obviously, if you took a picture like this and you zoomed in, it will all be in these squares, okay? This is what you'd see. I don't know if you can see the squares, but you'd see these kinds of squares the more you zoom in. These are the pixels. So vector graphics, Illustrator. Doesn't mean that you can't do vector in Photoshop, okay? But in general, vector is done in Illustrator when it comes to to graphics and such. However, I will be using Spreader, which is a software. It's called Spreader Pro. And we'll be using that to actually get into Unreal for our UI, right? The GUI. You don't need this. You don't need this. You don't need this. And you certainly don't need this. But most likely you're gonna need some 3D programming application. So if you don't want to use Maya, if you know something else already, you just want to see the rest of this stuff, I don't know, Blender or whatever else you use, just, you know, you need something to make the 3D model in. Okay, you can even make a 3D model in CAD if you want. You can import CAD right into UE4. But in general, you want to have something that you want to have a software package that can make animations. Now, obviously, you can make some animations in UE4, but they're not very no, they're not made. This is not made for an animation. So everything essentially goes purchased. What is that purchased? Oh yeah, purchased audio. My bad. Okay, so once you have the stuff in the Unreal Engine, we're going to be using the Unreal Engine. The purchased audio actually goes into the engine, and obviously the blueprint is what we're going to be programming in, assuming I can get something off of this. There we go. Okay, maybe like this, because it's better, right? So we've got all of this here. This is all the pipeline that's going to be this is what's going to be like, and then we're going to ship everything out of UE4. This stuff is going to go onto Steam, which, by the way, will probably not have green light by the time we're done. And they're going to have Steam Direct. So this is your Steam. Hopefully this will fit. Okay, maybe it won't. So we have to do this again. So there's Steam, right? This is your final output. This is the platform we're gonna be doing this for. Now, obviously, you can output to anything you want. This is a freaking, this is an amazing engine. So, it can output to a lot of stuff. But in general, this is what you're gonna need. Okay, you're gonna need at least perhaps Photoshop, at least Maya, and maybe something else. Yes, and I forgot one more very important thing. All of this, well, not all of this, but most of this will be source controlled. And source control is essentially, well, a fancier word would be version control, and a more accurate one at that. But all of this stuff, okay, that's in the engine, if I can make it big enough, obviously, all this stuff in the engine will be version controlled like this. So this is your version control, and it means that everything you do, okay, will be saved and backed up. And if something goes wrong, you can always revert to an older version. Now you could version control these as well, right? However, things are not that simple there, because Unreal Engine comes with an integration for source control and version control, and these usually do not. And even if they do, the auto-saving feature that they provide is good enough for you to rely on their backup, with the possible exception of Substance, which for some weird reason autosaves are not that good. But you could certainly use it, but I just wouldn't recommend it, because as long as the package has autosave, you'll be good to go. Okay. Also, for this, we'll be using Perforce. Okay. Perforce. This is going to be, well, this needs to be a little bit bigger. So let's make this bigger to 122, maybe like this. Oops, centralize. So perhaps this was a bad choice of a shape, but you get the idea. Okay, this is how the game, the software package, and how the pipeline is, right? You make something in Draw.io, which is going to be your concept. Then you start working in Maya. Once you're done making it in Maya, you're going to rig it if you need to animate it, obviously, or you can maybe vector animate it, vertex animated, or whatever you want to do with it. And then you're probably going to send it to Substance or to Photoshop. Use something to make it look better if you need to make it look better, or just send it to UE4. And then you're going to make some vector graphics if you want to add some UI immediately, or not, we can do it later. If we're going to purchase some audio, we can use some Audacity. Audacity is a free software, so you can use it for free, download it, plenty of documentation. You can certainly edit things with it. It's a very powerful tool. So you can use Audacity if you want for audio. Actually, let me just make this here and add it. Audacity and purchase audio. So you could purchase audio, modify it, and obviously, add it to a UE4, or you could just purchase it if it's already well done yourself. You're going to use Blueprint to make your systems work, the ones that you would define right here, right? All the systems that you've created over here, you will use the Blueprint to define it in your programming section, and then after you keep adding content as well. So yeah, this is how this whole thing looks like. Obviously, Perforce will be working throughout this place. At least in my case, I'll be using Perforce. Now, whatever you want to do, it's up to you if you know some other type of version control. But yeah, and obviously once you get to this point, yeah, you can start adding different patches and DLCs, etc., whatever you got problems, because bug fixes will be required. Usually we'll squash the bigger ones during the optimization and the polishing passes, but you never know. Okay, and on that note, I think we should stop this video. Just let this sink in. Maybe download all the software that you need. So go into Maya's website and download their LT version if you want for a trial, or maybe download it. Maybe just buy it outright, or just get it somehow. All right. Substance is not required. Photoshop is not required. You could use Paint for what I care. There's also, I think there's some good open source solutions for when it comes to tech, 2D editing programs. Like I think Blender, it was called. Yeah, I think it was Blender. Well, there was basically something else other than Photoshop. Then you got your Illustrator if you want, or Spreader Pro. I would get Spreader Pro, really. They're pretty cheap, and they're integrated into Steam, so you're always gonna have it, and they're good enough on their 2D bit. UE4 obviously is for free. You can download it from Epic's website. Perforce is a little bit tricky. I'm gonna actually, before we begin, I'll probably show you how to set this up, because really there's no point to start working on something when it's not backed up. Okay, so we're gonna set this up at first. Actually, Perforce needs its own, probably needs its own little diagram, but we'll talk about this later. So you download this, and then it's a good idea if you find some websites that are gonna give you some textures. If you don't want to do this in Photoshop or Illustrator, you can always download textures from, there's loads of CG galleries out there. Just Google it and you'll find it. And obviously download Audacity, because it's free. Okay, if you need you'll eventually probably need it, even not for game development. It's just a good program to have on your hard drive or SD drive, whatever it is. And yeah, once you have all of this stuff done, you can just go on to the next video, and we'll talk about version control, because before everything else, it's you should probably get your source your source control application done. So you're gonna need a server, all right? But that's a story for the next video. All right, I'll see you then, guys. Bye bye.